using my I'm using my personal account. So this is kind of an orientation to semester number 1 of 899. We'll come back whenever we hit, when we're getting ready for semester number 2, we'll come back and kind of say, okay, let's take the steps ahead from here. And then at the end of that process, I like to come back around and review. Okay, let's review chapter 4. Let's review chapter 5. Let's talk about the dissertation process, the defense process, which is always more involved than people think and takes longer, I think, than most students think it might. It sounds like it should be fairly simple. I suppose it is. It's just everybody else is involved then. So the defense process involves a committee. It involves whatever happened in the defense, that it involves Dr. Flynn. He's the next to the last word. I send him whatever we have completed. He's usually has recommendations, as did the committee. He sends it back. If it's something real simple, I just do it. I don't bother the student with it because you all are completely exhausted by then. And then I send that back to him. If he approves, then I send it on to Josh Nangle, who is responsible for the publication and ProQuest. And he's the last one. I'm telling you, if there's one tiny little thing out of place, he'll find it. And once again, if it's something fairly simple, I fix it myself because I just feel your pain at that point, So usually we will do this every time we come up to some new aspect of the process. And so I wanted to make sure you were clear. We did a thing in 897 on the transition from 897 to 899. So I'm not going to necessarily try to review that. I just want to review where we are tonight in the process. So the dissertation proposal is what is complete. And the benefit is that we did that together. So if the folks that have a chair who, and this is the first time they see somebody's proposal, they may have a lot of suggestions for changing it. Well, I've already done that with you. So I'm not going to have a lot of suggestions. It's easier for me, it's easier for you if I can move somebody from 897 to 899, because we've already really massaged everything that we were doing together. And so unless you're convinced, I think just to be safe, it might be good anyway to send me your most recent iteration of your proposal, the most recent version of the document that you have. Send it to me, and then I'm really confident for sure. Okay, what I'm looking at is the very last thing that was done for the proposal, and I will give it one more really good eyeball and send back feedback. Now you well remember that for some students I said, okay, Dr. Flynn, it says it's okay to show him especially the summary of the literature, if it's more than what should be in an introduction and in a summary, he doesn't mind seeing it. But I remember saying, your chair will want you to reduce it. Well, now that's me. So there's no question I'm going to come back and say, okay, you need to reduce the summary of the literature to 12 pages. And the BTH foundations to 12 pages. And this is not the last time you're going to reduce those sections, because you're unpacked from this point on, you're unpacking all of that. So you're going to do 30 pages at least for chapter 2. You're going to do 30 pages for chapter 3. All the work that you have done so far is good and will be important at that point. But remember, chapter 1, the proposal becomes chapter 1. Introduction. So it's just designed, if somebody, remember, we're publishing your dissertation. So if somebody calls it, from the database and they want to begin to read what it is that you've done, and they're going to read your introduction, we want to just get them interested. I mean, we want accurate introduction. but we want to be able to cast vision, make them want to read your whole dissertation. We don't want them to have to read your whole dissertation by reading the introduction. So, you know, that's just the way it works. We're thinking in terms of the final produced, the final published version of your dissertation. And we think in those terms more and more as we go forward. So I will look again at what is your last version of your proposal. I'll send you back feedback just like you're used to, and then you will tweak it and send it back to me, and then I'll say, okay, this is your final. I'll label it final chapter 1, and then you're done. Again, I try to help in 897 because occasionally we'll have a student who will. The proposal is sent to their chair and they'll say, okay, this is my final chapter 1, and the chair will say, no, it's not. And it's, not to be offended, but it's not the final chapter 1. I'm your chair. We're now going to do your dissertation. This is not the final chapter 1 until I say it is. So you all already, you're ready for that. You're ready for that. So I keep hearing noises. John, are you having trouble logging on, getting it to work? Oh, I see John. Okay. I kind of remove our pictures when I'm doing this thing. So chapter 1. Now you need to understand that as your chair, I'm only responsible for your dissertation. When I say only responsible, because that's a big chunk of work. I am not responsible in any way, shape, or form for your project. And that's different. It's like there's 2 tracks going on at the same time. The dissertation sets the stage with background research, chapters 2 and 3, for your project, and then it reports your project in chapters 4 and 5. And so it's the writing, the final, composition of your dissertation. It is my responsibility. Dr. Flynn up front is responsible for your project, and then as you dive into your project itself, you will have a project advisor. And we'll talk about that here in a moment. HSR project, of course, we looked at this last semester. Some of you have already done your CITI training. It's not a long course. I did it myself the first time I was working with 899 students because I wanted to see all the, okay, what is of concern. I think there's sometimes some confusion when you go and they want to know, okay, which training do you want? There's one that's basically a training for the social sciences, and it includes the word education in it, but it also includes the word nursing. So guys look at that and say, well, I don't want to be a nurse. Well, no, that's the social sciences training. So it includes education, includes us. And so you'll go in and you'll complete that. It will give you a certificate at the end, which you will pass along to Dr. Flynn when you start working on your application. I also gave you access to the HSR application. And I think even some of the supporting documents last semester, but don't try to have a perfect version of your HSR application when you start working with Dr. Flynn, because he's going to coach you. If there's anything that he needs, if there's anything that needs to be changed, okay, I need an additional document for this over here. He's going to happily coach you. He's not looking for perfection up front. I don't know that there is perfection up front. So you don't have an official ministry project until Dr. Flynn says you do. By approving your HSR application, will have all the necessary elements. It will stay the same unless something significant changes in your project. If it's something insignificant in that, you decide you need an additional document, or you decide that you're going to add somebody to, your list of interviewees or whatever it is, that doesn't change it doesn't change the structure of your project. And so you don't need to do another application unless you're just adding a whole new research element to it. So once Once that Dr. Flynn has approved your application, then you can officially begin to collect data through whatever instrument you want to use to start with. Students cannot collect data until the application has been approved. I hate to tell you, but occasionally someone will, and Dr. Flynn will make that person start over again from scratch. So the very best thing is to just leave it alone. You're just anxious. I just really want to send out this survey. I know you do. But until you have permission to do it through the process of approving your HSR application, you can't do it. Dr. Flynn does this so quickly. It's not unusual for him to be completely done in 2 or 3 weeks. Whereas I was used to a program I did at Liberty University, the Institutional Review Board, IRB, is the collection of all of the HSR representatives from the schools together. So we have 11 graduate schools at Regent. Every graduate school has their HSR representative. Dr. Flynn is ours. And so the Institutional Review Board for us will not meet to consider your application unless it looks problematic. But then it doesn't take 2 to 3 weeks. It could take a year. So I think Dr. Flynn is pretty good about saying, you know what, this thing over here is going to have to change. Occasionally, he will send me a note along with you and saying, okay, Larry, can you work with a student to find a low-risk way of doing this? I said, sure. It's probably not going to be as much fun, but it's doable. It's doable. Because if a student insists, no, I really do have to do this, then if the whole IRB, the Institutional Review Board has to meet, it could take a year, which we don't want. We don't want that. So if we can do it in 2 to 3 weeks, that's what we want to do. I think I did this stuff for you last semester. Do you guys remember this data collection analysis tools section? Do you remember that?
I remember it, Dr. Asplund, but I don't remember any specific tools.
Well, of course, I will send you a copy of this PowerPoint presentation. So don't worry about trying to copy anything down. You will be, when in the process of collecting data, it's good to have a place to put it other than Microsoft Word documents or Excel spreadsheets or Microsoft Word tables. So there are a variety of things that I can let you know what I think are the industry standards. Nota Bene is just a overall tool to put research notes. And so you're reading, etc., you're taking notes. Where do you want to put the notes so that you can organize them in a usable way, get back to them easily? You could do something like, the Microsoft, there's a QuickBooks, what's the name of what they do? There are a couple of other things that are just kind of a general thing. This would be specifically designed for academic purposes. You probably already have most of the notes you're going to take already somewhere. So I don't know that this is necessarily going to be that helpful unless you realize that you're going to start taking a lot more notes. Qualitative data analysis is a way of putting your qualitative data, whether it be the results of a pre-test and a post-test, or it's a result of some interviews, whatever. You're going to put all of that data down, and then you're going to divide it into themes, and then you're going to compare. So if you are doing, for instance, I just mentioned a pre-test and a post-test, and then you're going to do some interviews. When you do an interview, you need to record them and then transcribe them, which is it can be a nightmare. I'll show you the software that makes it easy. And then you will divide all of that data into themes, and then you will compare themes between one instrument, one data set, and another. And you will draw conclusions from that. Now, you can't do that on the fly. You've got to be able to put the data somewhere where you can easily, okay, I see this theme emerging and I see this theme emerging. I'm going to compare it to what I see over here with this data set. There's a variety of ways to be able to do that and make it easy for you. I'm a big fan of making it easy for you. So qualitative data analysis, you would just start loading the data that you collect. Frankly, the industry standard for qualitative data analysis is in vivo. And so I've put in all of the URL, but you'll see this when I give it to you as a PDF. So again, it's just a way of, I think it's more user-friendly as well. It's a way of looking for themes in your qualitative data and then comparing and contrasting across those themes. An industry standard for quantitative data is SPSS. It's an IBM software because, again, with quantitative data, you have numbers. And you have anonymized all the data. So you have no idea who this person is, where this person is. All you have is numbers. And so you need software that's going to crunch the numbers in a variety of ways. Maybe you're looking for a correlationships between various kinds of data. You know, whatever you want to do with it, you need software that will do that. I've only had one 899 student who had been an expert and an instructor with Microsoft Excel who did it all himself, just on spreadsheets. Well, I don't know that he got a better grade for it, you know, and it's good that he knew how to do that. But it's a lot easier if you will have software that will do that for you. Now, most DMin students do not do quantitative analysis, but if you do, because again, you're going to call up various ways of examining statistical analysis. You're going to do a variety of things where if you just had to do that on your own with an Excel spreadsheet, you're going to need to be an expert in statistical analysis, which is like a whole nother field. And so it's better just to get the software and let the computer do the work for you. It's okay to do a little bit of background work when it comes to statistical analysis if you haven't already and you're going to do some quantitative data, just so you have some sense of what you want to tell the software to do when it comes to analysis. I like Dragon Professional in terms of speech recognition because once again, if you did a focus group or you did some interviews, etc., you need to be able to transcribe what was said in that situation. And so if you did it the old-fashioned way where you're just typing and you have to, okay, give me about 10 seconds of that, okay, stop. Now I'm going to type it and so forth. It takes forever. And so be happy that you don't have to do that. With Dragon Professional, you would just, and this is not an expensive software, you would just load an audio file like an MP3 into the software and it would transcribe it for you. It's a beautiful thing. And then you would just put it into your qualitative data analysis software tool, whichever one you're deciding to use. So these are all things designed to make it easier but I think it also produces more accurate findings in the end, because in the end you're going to want to say, okay, so what did I learn, what's going to be helpful, what would be helpful to someone else, etc. So in terms of our process, of course, this is where we're at, guys. We're going to complete chapter 1. I don't anticipate it would take very long. That's, again, my job is going to be to oversee the composition of your final chapters. And, you know, we get down to, don't we, Turabian, etc. We get down to making Microsoft Word not mess up your formatting, all the stuff that we talked about last semester. And it's, you know, one of the things that's difficult in the 899 process, and I don't think it'll be an issue for you guys, but occasionally I've said, you know, in 897, I'm going to do a little of what would be considered editing. That is to say, okay, you had some problem with your footnotes. I just fixed it because my job is to send your stuff on to Dr. Flynn, and then I say, by the way, your chair will not do any editing. And so try to make sure you know how this stuff works. And so here I here, in fact, I had one student that I said, and I predict that your chair will require you to have an editor, only to end up being her chair. So, it was a little bit uncomfortable. I think you guys are going to do just fine. I'm not going to require you to have an editor unless it looks like that your formatting issues will double the amount of time it would take to complete your dissertation. I would like you to have it all done in a good amount of time. Now, again, I warn you, an editor needs to be well trained in Turabian, in Microsoft Word, in Grammarly, and they need to be well trained when it comes to the process of producing final chapters for a doctoral dissertation, and they will be expensive. And so I'm not going to do that to you. I'm not going to, unless I can see, you know what, I don't think you will ever complete a dissertation without a chair. And it's horrible. It's horrible to say that. I don't anticipate saying that for any of you guys. So we will complete chapter 1 together ASAP. In the meantime, you're doing the HSR process. You've completed your training. You're starting to work on your application. I would encourage you to send that earlier rather than later to Dr. Flynn, because he's very, very good to coach you through that process. As soon as he says you have an approved HSR application, you're ready to do your research. You will also choose a field mentor. Your field mentor will also be a second reader on your committee at the end. But their job is not necessarily to edit in any way, shape, or form your dissertation, although they will be serving on your committee during your defense. Their job is to be available to you as you're doing your research, to come alongside of you and to give you advice. Now, on paper, they're required to have a terminal degree. However, if they have a graduate degree that's not a doctorate, but they have significant expertise and experience that's relevant to your project, usually it's okay. Now, it's my job to approve your field mentor, and usually you can make a pretty good case for it. So you would want to begin to think, now again, you will not begin to interact with your field mentor until you're starting to do your research, you're starting to collect data. I will interact with your field mentor in preparation for your defense. So it's someone who is an expert in the kind of research that you're going to be doing, or has significant experience, whether or not they've been trained per se, has significant experience that will enable them to give you some helpful advice along the way, or at least some helpful feedback. You can say, this is what I found. What do you think? So it's good to have somebody there. Now you have to have someone there because, again, we need a second reader at the end as well. And this will be helpful to you. It's not a paid position. I don't know that mine is. I've never been clear on that point, but I do what I do because I love doing it, frankly. And I love DMIN students, so that's just the way it works. So once your HSR application has been approved by Dr. Flynn, and the big issue is whether or not there are adequate protections for you, for your participants, for me, and for the School of Divinity, and for Regent University. So if it looks like you hope to access a vulnerable population, say, I want to be able to find some folks who have been traumatized, and I want to have individual interviews with them and find out what it's like to be traumatized and how has that worked for you. Forget it. That will never be approved. So it needs to look like everybody will be safe. And once it looks like everybody's going to be safe, then it's a low risk project and will be very quickly approved. So once it's approved, then you can dive in. Also then begin to continue to work on your chapters 2 and 3. Chapters 2 and 3, I can tell you in advance, once you do chapter 1, I will say, now what I recommend you do is you go into the summary of the literature. And if you had a longer version for Dr. Flynn in 897, start with a longer version, copy it and paste it, and begin to massage it and maybe to unpack it depending on what you need, because we're looking for 30 pages, minimum, and just keep the same headings. You're not starting over. You're just doing what you did for your proposal, and you're expanding it to be a chapter. Same with the biblical, theological, historical context, chapter 3. You will take the HSR Foundation section, copy it and paste it. Most of you did not have a long, because you didn't do anything in 700 in that area. So whatever you did in either in your final chapter, what is chapter 1 for us, or maybe if you had something more than that for 897, take the longer version, copy it and paste it, and begin to unpack it one chapter at a time. So chapter 2 first, then chapter 3. So you're not starting over with those chapters. Now with chapters 4 and 5, you are starting over because it's just a report of your project data. So that will then be the next thing that we will do. The goal, and I'll show you here in a moment, is to have a final chapter 2 and a final chapter 3 by the end of the summer. But you remember, you're not starting over. You're just expanding upon what you have already done. Which brings me to this. I kind of would like you to be realistic about how long this is going to take. I call this the ideal dissertation phase. Now, automatically some guys are saying, wow, this is too long. I remember one guy said, I'm going to do all of this in one semester. I said, you need, no offense, but not even Jesus could do all of this in one semester. Because we're not the only ones that has a schedule. So in the end, Dr. Flynn's got a schedule. We're going to have to go along with his schedule at the very end. And Josh, Nangle, he has a schedule. So this is not all up to us. We're fitting into a doctoral program from start to finish. So I think this is the ideal. It can take longer. I'm not aware of it ever taking less time. Now, remember, you have a maximum of 7 years to do a doctoral degree, a DMin degree. A PhD student can take as long as 10 years. But they're doing a lot more specific kind of work. And so this I consider to be ideal. If you, and I've seen this before, where a student starts 899 at the beginning of their 7th year, then this is the only possibility. But if you've got some room, some wiggle room, then you're going to be okay no matter what. So semester number 1, chapter 1 is approved. HSR application is approved. Chapters 2 and 3 are composed until we get a final, what we're happy with, final chapter 2, final chapter 3. And then you can begin to collect data. You have to gain access to participants that you know that you need, etc., which can take longer than some students think. So you can begin that process also in semester number 1. Semester number 2, your project research is conducted. And then you compose chapter 4 and chapter 5 of your dissertation. Chapter 4 is a description of your project. Chapter 5 is the report of your findings. And so when we come to the end of the second semester, we're looking to, you and I together, agree that what we have is a completed dissertation. Then chapter 3, rather semester 3 is about the defense process. So the dissertation defense is conducted, of course, has to be scheduled, is a little bit of I think I did send you a note on Andre Parker's defense is coming up fairly quickly. I said, by the way, you can invite observers, and some guys, they like to invite their second cousins, and I even had one that included a dog in the defense. I thought that was kind of unique. But usually they don't say anything. When we come to the end, I give them the option. Do you all have a question? Hopefully not. One time one pastor began to preach, so I had to find a polite way to say, thank you very much. God bless you. I appreciate you participating with us. So the dissertation defense is kind of fun. I think it's helpful to see one, frankly. Then I have to send, there are recommendations from the committee, which is me and your field mentor, and a third one only if, I'll say if we can have a third committee member. If you would like, ideally, another member of the faculty to participate in your defense as a member of the committee, let me know and I'll see if they're available. Now, they're going to be, they're going to tighten the screws down a little bit more, which is fine. But the committee will have recommendations, and so it will be my job between you and me. And a recommendation, I will ask you to do, to respond to a recommendation if I think you need to. If I think they're just being unnecessarily picky, I'll get back together with you and I'll say, okay, these are the things I think that would be helpful to change. The rest of it you can just ignore. Because in the end, it's up to me and it's up to you. So there is the dissertation defense along with recommendations. When that is done, I send that final version on to Dr. Flynn, and he's always going to have recommendations. He's got a tremendous eye, he has an engineering background, so he has tremendous eye for details, and he will send back to me a copy with the recommendations. Again, if it's something real simple, I'll usually just fix it myself. I'll do it too. I've come to know that he doesn't like one line at the bottom. He wants to make sure I know what he wants. So usually I'm not going to send something to him, frankly, unless I've already done that to the document. So I will send then that final version on to him. He will approve it. Then he sends it on to Joshua Nance, who is responsible for publication in ProQuest. And if he sees something that he thinks needs to change, then he'll send a note back to me. These things. Usually he'll send a note to you first. I would recommend if Dr. Nangle sends you a note, include me on it, because again, I am, I've taken responsibility at the end for what you've done. And so if it's just something real picky, I'll go ahead and change it. I had one brother who, Josh said, okay, your Roman numerals on your table of contents are they're capital Roman numerals, and they need to be lowercase Roman numerals. Well, this poor brother, he couldn't figure out how to do that for all the T in China. I said, we just need to go up and we need to uncheck the all caps box. Let me do it for you. He said, well, you're a genius. No, I'm not. I just know that you can go in and uncheck the all caps box and it will be fixed. So don't wrestle. I always say, don't wrestle in the end. If Josh has something that needs to be fixed, let me know, because chances are it's like a 10-second thing. And so there's no use to having, don't get an ulcer over this stuff. It's usually pretty simple as in the end. Now, Josh needs to publish he needs to get a document to publish 4 weeks before the end of the semester, which means the third semester is not an entire semester when it comes to the work we're doing. So we need to give him a document that he feels good about publishing, because then it's an official, Regent University document. You now are an expert in the area of your research. You have just officially added to the scholarly literature. So take it kind of seriously there at the end. So he needs to have that final document 4 weeks. So we don't have the whole third semester to do that. But we have enough time. You know, the Andre and Daryl are doing their defenses in January, and then we'll have plenty of time. We need to have it all done by, you know, late July, which we will. We just need to factor all that in, and I always do, you know, so it won't be a problem. We'll be fine. So in my mind, now it's possible to take longer than this. For instance, if you, one of my students, Derek, who is an active duty Marine Corps chaplain, is having trouble getting the admiral to approve his HSR application, even though Dr. Flynn has already done so. They've got the chain of command, you know. So it's taking him longer. And it's not his fault. He hasn't done anything to take longer. So it can take longer so long as we don't end up longer than 7 years. But if everything is smooth, it can be done in 3 semesters. Now I'm going to stop sharing because what I want to do is ask you, are you okay? Do you have any questions? Do you kind of know where we are now and what next steps are for you in the next few weeks?
C's got his hand up.
Who's got his hand up?
C.
Hey, send EMT to my house because I just passed out for the process.
You passed out? Do you know how to call 911?
Yeah.
Now listen, we're
So,
partners in this process, so it's not like I'm going to be sitting back wondering, okay, I hope they're still alive. You know, occasionally I'll send you a note and say, how you doing with chapter 2? Well, thank you for bringing that up. And I'll say, send me what you got so far, you know, and we'll work on it together. So you're not going to be alone in this process. Yeah, Mike.
I've got a handful of questions. One question is, where should I store my data? I know in this HSR application, I think there's information about where data is stored, how you're storing. Is there any recommendations on that? Is there specific software? Or if I just say it's in my, Google Drive, is that okay?
It needs to be secure. So when you use a software, it's automatically secure. I don't save anything on my computer, so that's kind of helpful for us. I have a OneDrive, which is a Microsoft cloud space that has to have a password to access. Google Drive, I think Google Drive is fairly common, but I think it's pretty secure because you can't access it without permission. It just needs to be secure. If it's stored on a thumb drive or it's stored, you can password protect a thumb drive, but if it's stored on your C drive, you know how it goes on your computer, it's less secure. So there need to be at least 1 or 2 steps to access your data.
Okay. So mine's gonna have an online survey. Is there a specific service, or is it okay that I just develop a custom on its own website for that?
That's an excellent question. SurveyMonkey is very good. And DMIN students fairly often use SurveyMonkey. It can do some analysis for you. I remember the first time I used SurveyMonkey, it couldn't do any analysis. So they've kind of developed it over time. In fact, if you have, Z likes Google Forms, you can do, there are a variety of forms. I don't know that Google Forms is not going to do any analysis for you, but it's handy to use some of those Google products. If you want the possibility of there being some analysis, because you remember you're going to have to, if it's quantitative data, you will have to anonymize the data, which means you need to remove identifiable information. And so it's helpful to have a software that does that for you as well. If you're just using a spreadsheet, then you're going to have to tweak all that stuff. It just depends on how much data you're using. If you're using a fair amount, I would feel safest if you're using some kind of a software that's doing that for you.
Okay. And is there anything that you want us to do in Canvas, or is us emailing you our chapter 1 plenty?
I prefer you emailing me. We will work together at email. Now, what I have to do is, like with Blackboard, now what I'll have to do is with Canvas is go in before a report is sent to the registrar and make sure all the boxes have information in it. And I think that's easy for me to do. I think it would just add aggravation for you to have to say, okay, now what does the registrar need? I'm not entirely sure. She needs something. And I kind of know what to do so that because you remember, it's the dean's office that will automatically move you forward in the process. So you don't have to re-enroll. You don't have to do anything. Usually Josh will send me an email. Any of you guys planning on completing your defense, etc., in this semester? I will say, no, we're going to do it next semester. So he'll make sure that you're moved ahead.
Do you know if next semester a 3 credit for us as well, or does it move to 1? When does
3
it start?
credit. Two classes, 2 899s of 3
Okay.
credits, because remember your final piece of the doctoral program is 9 credits. So 897 is 3.
Gotcha.
Sections of 899 are 3 each. That equals the 9 that you need.
Great.
I remember telling the one guy, said he could do it in 1 semester. I said, well, then you won't have enough credits to graduate. So you might as well just slow down, for goodness sakes. But then after that, it's 899A, which you don't get credit for, but you only pay for one unit, 1 credit. So it's just designed to make it more doable financially. And you don't get final grades for 899 until your dissertation is complete. So you will be giving an IP, an in progress, every step along the way until you're done. And then the grades, a P will be inserted in those 2 units of 899 when you're done.
That's great. That's helpful. John, I haven't met you. Where are you from?
Oh, so I'm from High Point, North Carolina.
Awesome. I'm up here in the Richmond, Virginia area.
Okay, we're close by then. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
So who are the 2 people that's defending this semester?
Andre Parker's in Alaska. He is a retired, I can't remember. He actually was an active duty chaplain, retired from the chaplaincy, and pioneered a church. They're both Baptist pastors. And Daryl Parker is in rural Virginia. He has oversight of 3 small congregations, kind of out in the country. And so he accessed all 3 when he was collecting data. And I think it worked out really well for him. So Daryl Hudson is the other one. And so Daryl, this is his 4th semester. Daryl, these guys are preaching machines. And I love these guys, So Daryl ended up preaching a series of revivals. I said, man, when you feel like you've petered out on revival, you need to get back to work on your dissertation. It took him 4 semesters. Andre, I think, had a cadre of secretaries that helped him, so he did it fast. Both of them are great guys, and they've done a super good job. Their dissertation, so far as I am concerned, is done. Now we just have this final process that will involve everybody, essentially. I think Andre has invited 25 people. I don't know. Some people I don't know where he found them. So, and that's fine. Now, Z, you had a question. When it comes to chapter 2, you will start with the summary of the literature in your proposal. Copy it and paste it. Keep the headings the same. Don't change anything. Keep the footnotes the same. Copy it and paste it into a brand new blank document.
Okay.
That's chapter 2, and then just start to unpack it because you just need more background information. In some cases, it's okay to unpack the sources you already introduced in the summary of the literature. In some cases, you may want to add a couple because you found a couple that you find to be helpful. And so you may want to add a couple of sources in that process, and that's fine. Again, you're just expanding on what you've already done. And then when chapter 2 is done, you will go into the BTH Foundation section of your proposal, copy it and paste it intact, don't change anything, put it on a blank page, and then start to unpack it so that it's chapter 3 and it's the biblical, theological, and historical context instead of foundations. And it's really not, if you take the time to say, okay, well, how would I, and in fact, it's okay to say, do you have any recommendations on how I could expand? Well, not having read your source, I don't know that I can. But occasionally, like for Mike, several of the guys had done a lot of work in 700, and I had recommended, okay, you don't need this table, you don't need this graph, you don't need this bulleted list in your proposal, but all that's going to be great in chapter 2. So keep it, don't lose it, because all of that extra stuff is going to be really, really good. So I think sometimes you've noticed when you've been reading some of that stuff that there's more information there than what you gave in your proposal. Now you're going to unpack that and you're going to put it into the chapters.
So when you said 30 pages, are you talking about each chapter 30 pages, or you're talking about the whole?
Each
Okay.
chapter 30 pages. Each chapter. Now remember, the dissertation is, as a rule of thumb, 125 pages, not counting front and back matter. Back matter would include possible appendices. Bibliography, it includes a bibliography. Chapters 4 and 5 are shorter. They're more like 20 pages, not 30, because you're just sticking to the facts. So in chapter 4, you're just describing your project, what you did, how you did it. And you're not preaching, you're not going to be given an altar call at the end. You're just given the facts. So usually you can do that in about 20 pages. Chapter 5, you're reporting the findings, the results of the analysis of the data, and it can be done in 20 pages. Now, when you do that, then you end up with 125 pages. Now, I'm not going to be legalistic on page count. These two fellas that we're going to be working with in June, I think they ended up with 100, one guy had 117 pages. I said, there's some of the best, that's 117 of some of the best pages I've ever read. I don't recommend you do anything. Let's just do this. Let's use this. So I'm not going to be legalistic about that. Occasionally we will get 300 pages and I will say, no. Because people are going to have to read this. And if they call down your dissertation and they see it's 300 pages, they're just going to move on. They're not going to read. They're not. I remember one brother sent me a chapter 3 that was 126 pages. I said, no, that's too much. We don't need that much information. Honestly, we just don't. So the DMIN project is it's got a good narrow focus. It has a very specific goal. I don't think you need that. Just narrow it down. But some guys are master preachers and they end up preaching in their dissertation chapters, which is also not needed either. Just keep it academic. Give us the facts. It doesn't. Now it's okay, and I will usually tell a guy who gives me too much, I said, plan now on writing your book later. because it's not uncommon to write a book based on a dissertation. And you can preach all you want in your book. We just don't want you to preach in your dissertation. Mike, did you have any other questions?
No, that was great. Thank
Mr.
you.
John.
Yes. So as far as the reader, finding someone to do that, who you said they have to have a terminal degree? Is that what you said?
And even with a terminal degree, John, that doctorate, they still need to have relevant expertise. This needs to be somebody that you are going to occasionally contact as you're conducting your research and with questions. If you have questions about, okay, I'm not sure what to do about this, or this is what I found with this questionnaire, what do you think? They're going to come alongside of you, so they're to serve you. I'm not going to communicate with them at all until we're making final plans for a defense. And I will send them your final dissertation and say, by the way, let's have a conversation if you think that would help. You're not obligated to edit or have feedback on the dissertation. You are there to be an advisor to the student as they're doing their research. So John, when you find somebody that you think you would feel comfortable with, they've got helpful expertise, you can contact them and say, I got a couple of questions for you. Send me their name, and a little bit of information, and I just need to sign off on that.
Okay.
And then I'll know who they are, because then together we will be your committee at the end.
Okay. And so there's never been an exception as far as the terminal degree. That's like the status quo.
No, that's often an exception. Often an exception.
Okay.
So one brother did he did his dissertation on Messianic Judaism, and he had a relationship with a Messianic Jewish rabbi who had a master's, like an MDiv seminary degree.
Mm-hmm.
But he was the guy. I mean, he'd been an active rabbi for 30, 40 years. I said, no, this is the guy you need.
Okay.
So they just need to have relevant expertise.
Gotcha.
Pastor Bob, how you doing? Do you have a question?
I think I'm with Z. I'm a little nervous, but I'm putting in the work. I guess one of the questions that I would ask, I guess, just for your opinion, I'm writing a lot in the BTH portion right now, and expanding on the lit review. One of the challenges that I have is I never feel like my writing is really strong. It seems like always like really rough draft.
Mm-hmm.
And when we're writing, would you want us to show you what we have at a certain point, and to try to tighten it up or make it stronger, or
If you have a rough draft, Bob, send that to me. Again, you're not working for perfection. Any one of these steps, you're not working for perfection up front. Okay. Feel free to send it to me. Now, I find with doctor ministry students, if they end up needing an editor, it's not due to poor writing. It's due to, for some reason, they never really got their brain wrapped around Turabian. It's a formatting issue, and the formatting issues take a lot of time unless you've kind of learned it. If you've mastered it for the most part along the way, it doesn't really take a lot of time. But so if I get a copy and it's just all over the place. I mean, man, your footnotes they're in the middle of the page. This is not going to work. So it usually ends up more that I find that the students, when you get this far, your research is already good. Your writing is good. It's just a matter of getting it all to work together in some kind of a final form. So whenever you have a rough draft, feel free to send that to me. and I will give you feedback instead of fixing footnotes. And I don't know that you all will need to fix footnotes can be tricky. Instead of fixing footnotes, I'll say, you need to review Turabian formatting for footnotes for this or these footnotes. And by the way, here's the quick way to do it. You don't even have to have the Bible, like the Turabian Bible. You can access this web page, and it will give you all the information you need. If there's a shortcut, I'd love to find it.
I think the thing that was really helpful for me was where you said to copy like your lit review and just massage it. And in my mind's eye, I was thinking I was going to completely redo my outline for the lit review, like from scratch. But now what I'm seeing is that I can, suss out more of the same the same sources and then add sources, but not have to start from scratch, but basically, just begin to build more material and put that in. Because in my mind, I couldn't think of a way to without starting from scratch, because I didn't think I could really just make that a starting point. So that was really helpful.
Well, it's best to not start from scratch. Your second reader, Dr. Flynn, they're going to see, okay, chapter 1, introduction, and you have an outline, you have subheads for both your summary of the literature and your BTH foundations. If there is continuity and consistency, then moving over into chapter 2 and in chapter 3, it looks good. If you started over from scratch, it wouldn't look good. So it's actually better if you can maintain. I mean, if your proposal is approved, then that content is approved, and that structure is approved, that outline is approved. So it's better to just build on that. Starting over would not look good.
So if some of those sentences are the same or similar, it's okay.
Yes, because again, we're going to narrow down, as I recall, Mike, the work you did for 700. Remember, 700's work was more general. It was not as strictly divided up between scholarly and BTH. But I think I remember your first piece was maybe 26 pages, something like that.
Sorry, how many pages?
26. The first time you sent me something on your summary of the literature.
I don't think I had to narrow mine down.
Okay, very good.
Yeah.
Somebody did.
Yeah.
And so usually it's, if the work that you did in 700 fit into the summary of the literature, and it rarely does, because there's usually some BTH elements in the work that was done in 700. They have to be extracted. So whatever you ended up doing, that content and that outline was approved, and it's best just to shift it over and then to expand on it.
That's helpful. Thank you.
So I've known John Pooler for a while. John, not as long as I've known Mike Hennigan. Mike was an undergraduate student of mine 30 years ago. How long ago was that, Mike?
Over 30 years, 92, so 31 years ago. I think I just turned 18.
So
Nice.
we both have less hair.
Yep.
I'm not going to be flipping my head around. I can tell you that right now. John is a champion.
I've got a facade.
If I can brag on John a little bit, when John first started this process, COVID hit hard.
Oh.
And COVID killed John's congregation.
Yeah,
And it was just discouraging. It was depressing. I mean, what do you do?
absolutely.
That was true for John, but it was not only true for John. Other people, COVID was just a disaster for them. But John didn't give up. John let me poke him a little bit along the way.
Yes, I appreciate it too.
and finally completed, did great work. I mean, the work that John was doing from the beginning was fine. It was just a disaster. It was a COVID disaster. So
Perfect storm.
I appreciate perseverance. It is a fruit of the spirit. It's a virtue. It's a good thing. It can be hard. It can be really, really hard.
Yeah.
And so, coming out of it, all of you are going to do research that will be immensely helpful, not only to you, but to a lot of other people, not only in the process of you doing your research, but in the process of people reading your dissertation later on. It's going to be very, very helpful. So Z does some great work with young people. I love projects. We have a significant number of projects that are going to be aiming at millennials and or Gen Z's kids, because we don't know for sure what to do with them. And so we're counting on Z to tell us. Bob's got a great cross-cultural project up there in Dallas, Texas. Everybody lives in Dallas, so he's got access to all kinds of, they're all Cowboys fans, no matter where they're from. So I'm very proud of all four of you. I'm looking forward to working together with you. Remember, first step, HSR application, chapter 1. And I wouldn't worry too much about the rest until you feel comfortable you've got that. And then I will say, all right, let's start working on chapter 2. Let's give it a go, and give me an occasional report. How's it going? If it looks like you get stuck, sometimes we get stuck. I'll say, send me what you got so far, and we'll work together on it, and we'll get it done. I promise we will. So,
John, what is your project on?
Sorry.
What is your project on, John?
So really dealing with creating studies for it's kind of touching on the sense of revitalization, but it's more or less in the sense of kind of gelling the GO principle of evangelization. So kind of just kind of getting a dead church to live again, dry bones to live again. So
that's
hey,
exciting.
so John knows about dead churches.
yes.
So
And
John, what did you think about Tom Rainey book? The autopsy, was it Tom Rainey? The autopsy of a dead church?
Dead church. Yeah, that was phenomenal. It's great when you have people who want to hear it, we try to read through it as a church, and you can deflect a lot from that, and kind of say, no, it's not me, that's not me. But it's very uncomfortable, but it's great for growth. It is.
Yeah. I've read it several times.
You may find that your project is more generalizable than you think up front, because you have a pretty clear focus on your research context.
Yeah.
I remember visiting with Daryl Hudson, who has a tremendous sense of humor, so we spent too much time joshing with each other. But Daryl thought, he's pastoring 3 small African-American rural congregations in rural Virginia. He had a very clear focus on, what is it going to take to give them a missional vision and not just be the family-run country churches, et cetera, et cetera. And so we did some great research, only to have some of the mostly Anglo small rural churches find out what he was doing, read what his findings were, and said, that stuff, we need that stuff as well.
Gotcha.
And so he's going to end up having a very broad use of his data and of his project going forward. And all of these guys are very, very excited about, when you're done with your project, let's organize some seminars or whatever we need to do, and let's spread the word.
Yeah.
So who knows how the Lord may use your research along the way.
I guess for me, I'm hoping that it will open the eyes of some youth leaders to get outside the box, our traditional way of doing church, and help them to be more intentional of being engaged in the community. And so tell you what my topic is. My topic is what constitutes youth ministry post-COVID for ages 18 to 14 in Los Angeles, California.
That's awesome.
And so I just feel like, whoever you decide to put over your youth ministry has to be intentionally engaged in your community, because as we know, most of your churches are commuters. And so if everyone is, let's just say it's 65% commuters. All right. So that means that other 45%, what are you doing with them if they're not commuters? Because that means all the rest of those young people, in order for them to be engaged in your church, they have to get a ride to church. And young people don't drive as much, or if they do, it's very supervised. And so in it, you have to figure out a way, how do you get the people around your church strategically involved? And so you have to go where they are at. So whether that be at a community center or whatever, like I feel like all churches should have a youth basketball team, a baseball team, some sports, some art, because it's all around our church. All we got to do is say, hey, as a church, we're going to put a team in it. So you gather the young people around that age group and say, hey, we're starting a church league. And this is the name, you put your church name on the shirt, whatever, if they allow you. But then you just, from there, you have Christian leaders who are now leading your teams, and they don't have to worry about being involved with a secular coach who's going to cuss them out the entire time. But you have Christian brothers that are around them, that's building them up spiritually and providing them biblical principles with doing effective ministries.
That sounds a lot like what that ministry Upward does. Are you familiar with them?
I'm not.
Yeah, it might be. I don't know if they have any research that'd be helpful to you, but Upward is basically a plug and play church league thing for exactly what you said, and they have their own branding and things like that, and a church can just pick them up and start going with it.
Yeah.
Communities are going to vary. Certainly, LA is a unique cultural context. And COVID did mess with the kids. Every generation is formed by a key event. I'm convinced that Gen Z has been formed and is being formed by COVID.
Yeah.
It's probably affected them more seriously than anyone else. So finding, looking for models that will meet them at the point where they are takes research. I mean, you have to research it. You can't assume that you know. So you try a variety of things and you end up deciding what worked best. So Z, you are certainly going to be on our prayers. You're certainly going to be on our prayers.
Yeah. Thanks.
An exciting project.
Let me pray for you then, and I'm going to let you know it's only 6 o'clock for Z and I, but it's later than that for the rest of you guys. So, what were you showing us, Z?
I was gonna tell John, he wrote another book too, John, if you haven't seen it, The Post-Quarantine Church.
Oh, is it like got red and blue,
It's like
colors?
white. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
white with a different, kind
Okay.
of
Yeah.
like a subway kind of deal, like a DC
Okay.
subway. But yeah, he wrote another one, 6 urgent challenges plus opportunity that will determine the future of the congregation. So, maybe something you want to pick up from Amazon as well.
That's great.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
No problem.
We need new patterns. I remember Nathan Foster, who is Richard Foster's son. I remember him saying in a podcast that the American church, this was in the middle of it, the American church is being deconstructed by COVID. So what we end up with, we're not yet entirely sure.
Yeah, that's true.
So you all are contributing to that. Let's pray. Father, we thank you that you have brought us to this place at this time for a reason. And we are just excited about, first of all, coming before you humbly and saying we're counting on you to teach us, to guide us, give us favor, lead us.
Thank you, Lord.
We want to have your thoughts. We even want to have your words. And so I pray that there would be refreshing for each of these good brothers every day they engage in this process. There would be a sense of encouragement from your Holy Spirit. You would lead them to resources that will be important to what they end up with finally. Give them favor, Father. Lead them to the people that will be a key to their success. I thank you, Lord, in advance for the excellent work that they're going to do and the results of it that will spread out not only through the research, but through for years to come, for people accessing their dissertations. Maybe some may even write a book based on the research, that you're going to use their good work to make considerably important kingdom contributions to the world and to the body of Christ. So we thank you for that in advance. Come with peace, with good health and strength, refreshing. Let there be, Lord, just a sense of confidence that you're going to lead them and you're going to bless them for being faithful to participating in this program. And we thank you for it. In Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
All right, my good brothers. It is an honor. It is a privilege.